What if everything we thought we knew about Kiara was wrong? What if the future queen of the Pride Lands wasn't the rebellious but ultimately good-hearted princess we believed her to be, but rather a calculating political strategist who nearly succeeded in one of the most shocking plots in Disney history? The Lion King 2 presents Kiara as a headstrong young lioness who simply wants freedom from royal responsibilities. But when you examine her behavior through a different lens, a far darker pattern emerges. This isn't the story of a princess finding love and bringing peace to warring prides. This is the story of a potential regicide that was abandoned at the last moment. Let's start with the most obvious red flag: Kiara's systematic defiance of Simba's authority. This isn't typical teenage rebellion. Every single rule she breaks serves a strategic purpose that undermines her father's position as king. From the very beginning, Kiara demonstrates a concerning disregard for the chain of command. When Simba assigns Timon and Pumbaa to watch over her during her first hunt, she doesn't just want privacy, she actively works to lose them. But notice how calculated her escape is. She doesn't run in a random direction. She heads straight toward the Outlands, the one place Simba has explicitly forbidden her from going. This wasn't curiosity. This was reconnaissance. Watch her body language during the training scenes with Simba. While he's explaining the responsibilities of a future queen, Kiara's attention consistently drifts. Her eyes don't show the glazed look of boredom. They show the sharp focus of someone mentally cataloging information for later use. She's not ignoring the lessons about leadership. She's studying them to understand what she'll need to overcome. The timing of her accidental encounter with Kovu is perhaps the most suspicious element of all. Consider the logistics. The Pride Lands are vast, yet somehow this sheltered princess manages to stumble directly into the path of the one lion who has been specifically trained to infiltrate her father's pride. The mathematical probability of this chance meeting is virtually impossible. But what if it wasn't chance at all? Examine the evidence more closely. Kiara doesn't just happen upon Kovu during her hunt. She finds him in an area that's technically neutral territory, not quite the Outlands, but far enough from Pride Rock that their meeting would go unnoticed by Simba's patrols. This suggests prior knowledge of outsider territories and movement patterns. How would an isolated princess have access to such intelligence? The answer becomes clearer when you analyze her interactions with the Pride Lands residents before meeting Kovu. Kiara has unusually detailed conversations with hunting parties returning from border patrols. She asks questions that seem innocent on the surface, about animal movements, weather patterns, safe passage routes, but together they form a comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation. More telling is her reaction to learning about the outsiders. While Simba expresses concern and Nala shows worry, Kiara displays fascination. Not the innocent curiosity of a sheltered royal, but the keen interest of someone evaluating potential assets. She asks specific questions about their numbers, their capabilities, their grievances against the pride. These aren't the questions of someone seeking to understand a threat. They're the questions of someone assessing an opportunity. The fire incident that leads to her rescue by Kovu reveals even more suspicious details. Kiara, who has been presented as an inexperienced hunter, somehow manages to chase prey directly into the path of a grassland fire. Yet her escape route suggests intimate knowledge of the terrain. She doesn't run randomly, but follows specific paths that would theoretically lead to safety, even though they ultimately lead to Kovu. This raises a critical question. Was Kiara really saved by Kovu? Or did she engineer the entire scenario to create a believable first meeting? Her behavior immediately after the rescue is equally revealing. Instead of gratitude mixed with suspicion, the normal reaction to being saved by a stranger from enemy territory, Kiara shows immediate trust and interest. She doesn't ask how Kovu happened to be in the area, or why an outsider would risk himself for a Pridelander. Instead, she quickly steers the conversation toward learning about his background and capabilities. The psychological profile that emerges is deeply troubling. Kiara demonstrates advanced strategic thinking, sophisticated manipulation techniques, and a concerning ability to compartmentalize emotional responses. These aren't the traits of a naive princess. They're the characteristics of someone trained in political intrigue. Even more disturbing is the pattern of how she handles authority figures. With Simba, she employs a combination of apparent compliance followed by deliberate disobedience. She listens to his instructions carefully, not to follow them, but to understand exactly what she needs to circumvent. When confronted about her actions, she uses emotional manipulation, appealing to concepts of independence and self-determination that she knows will resonate with Simba's own past experiences. This psychological manipulation extends to her interactions with other Pride members. She cultivates relationships with younger lions and lionesses who express frustration with traditional hierarchies, not to mentor them or provide guidance, but to create a network of potential supporters who might view a change in leadership favorably. The most chilling evidence comes from examining her knowledge base. Throughout her interactions, Kiara demonstrates understanding of political dynamics that far exceeds her supposed education. She knows which Pride members have grievances against Simba's policies, which hunting territories are disputed, which alliances are strongest and weakest. This isn't information a sheltered princess would naturally possess. Where would she have learned such detailed intelligence about potential vulnerabilities in her father's rule? The only logical conclusion is that she actively sought out this information as part of a systematic evaluation of how to destabilize the current power structure. When viewed through this lens, Kiara's entire character arc takes on a sinister dimension. Her journey of self-discovery becomes a carefully orchestrated campaign to position herself for a premature ascension to power. Her romantic relationship with Kovu transforms into a strategic alliance designed to eliminate opposition and create a smoother transition. The evidence is circumstantial but overwhelming. The pattern of behavior, the suspicious timing, the advanced knowledge, the psychological manipulation, all point to a young lioness who is far more dangerous than anyone realized. But this raises the ultimate question. If Kiara was indeed planning to remove her father from power, how did she intend to accomplish it? The answer to that question reveals the true sophistication and ruthlessness of her planned approach. The psychological profile of someone capable of plotting against their own father requires us to examine the unique pressures and influences that shaped Kiara's worldview. What we discover is a perfect storm of circumstances that could have driven even a naturally good-hearted individual toward desperate measures. Consider the impossible burden placed on Kiara from birth. She isn't just any princess. She's the daughter of Simba, the legendary king who defeated Scar and restored the Pride Lands. Her father is viewed as a living legend, a lion who overcame exile, tragedy, and seemingly insurmountable odds to reclaim his birthright. How does a young lioness measure herself against such an impossible standard? The psychological pressure of living in Simba's shadow cannot be understated. Every action Kiara takes is evaluated against the question, is this worthy of Simba's daughter? Every decision is scrutinized through the lens of whether she's demonstrating the wisdom and courage that made her father a hero. This constant comparison creates a psychological environment where normal development becomes impossible. But there's a deeper, more troubling dynamic at work. Simba's own traumatic experiences have made him an overprotective father, which paradoxically undermines Kiara's ability to develop genuine leadership skills. He shields her from real challenges while simultaneously expecting her to be ready for the ultimate challenge of ruling the Pride Lands. This contradiction creates cognitive dissonance that could drive someone toward radical solutions. The timing of her psychological development is crucial. Kiara comes of age during a period of relative peace and prosperity in the Pride Lands. Unlike Simba, who was forged by adversity and loss, she has no defining crucible to prove her worthiness. In a culture that values strength and decisive action, this lack of a heroic origin story becomes a psychological liability. More significantly, Kiara is acutely aware that she will never be the kind of ruler Simba was, simply because the circumstances that created his legend cannot be replicated. She cannot restore the Pride Lands because they've already been restored. She cannot defeat a great evil because Scar is already gone. Her reign, no matter how competent, will inevitably be viewed as maintenance rather than transformation. This psychological trap creates a powerful motivation for manufactured crisis. If Kiara cannot inherit a legendary moment, perhaps she needs to create one. And what could be more transformative than navigating the Pride Lands through a succession crisis while simultaneously resolving the outsider conflict? The influence of Zira, even indirect, adds another layer of psychological complexity. Through her relationship with Kovu, Kiara gains exposure to an entirely different philosophy of leadership. Zira's outsiders operate under a system where power is taken, not inherited, where strength matters more than bloodline, and where decisive action trumps cautious deliberation. This exposure to alternative leadership models could have been profoundly destabilizing for someone already questioning their place in the established order. Zira's ideology, filtered through Kovu's stories and perspectives, might have seemed like a solution to Kiara's legitimacy crisis. Why wait decades for a natural succession when you could prove your worthiness through bold action? The strategic advantages of removing Simba while he remains popular reveal sophisticated political thinking that's deeply concerning in someone so young. A beloved king who passes away unexpectedly becomes a martyr whose legacy protects his chosen successor. By contrast, a king who lives long enough to make unpopular decisions, or who shows signs of aging and weakness, creates opportunities for rivals to challenge the succession. Kiara would have understood that acting while Simba was still revered ensured that she would inherit not just his throne, but his mythological status. She would become the tragic young queen who had to assume power before she was ready, automatically generating sympathy and support from the pride. The narrative practically writes itself. The brave princess forced to grow up too quickly, bearing the weight of her father's legacy while navigating unprecedented challenges. This kind of strategic thinking demonstrates a level of political sophistication that raises serious questions about Kiara's true nature. Where does a sheltered princess learn to think like a court conspirator? The answer might lie in her careful observation of how power actually functions within the Pride Lands. Despite Simba's heroic status, his rule isn't without contradictions and tensions. He's protective to the point of being controlling, decisive to the point of being inflexible, and confident to the point of dismissing alternative perspectives. These traits, while understandable given his traumatic past, create friction with Pride members who remember the more collaborative leadership style of Mufasa. Kiara would have been perfectly positioned to observe these dynamics and identify the pressure points where Simba's rule was vulnerable to criticism. Her access to private family discussions would have given her insights into which policies were controversial, which allies were wavering, and which decisions were causing internal debate. The psychological profile that emerges is of someone who understands power structures intuitively, but lacks the emotional maturity to handle that knowledge responsibly. She sees the gap between her father's public image and private struggles, recognizes the temporary nature of his popular support, and calculates that a window of opportunity exists that might not be available in the future. Even more troubling is the evidence that her heroic moments might have been carefully calculated rather than spontaneous expressions of courage. Her decision to venture into the Outlands can be reframed as intelligence gathering. Her befriending of Kovu becomes asset recruitment. Her defiance of Simba's orders transforms into preparation for eventual confrontation. This recontextualization of Kiara's actions reveals a chilling possibility that every major decision she made was part of a comprehensive strategy to position herself for premature succession. Her apparent growth and maturity throughout the film might actually represent the evolution of her plotting rather than genuine character development. The psychological sophistication required for such a long-term deception suggests either natural political instincts that border on sociopathic, or training and guidance from someone with extensive experience in manipulation and power dynamics. Given that Zira was actively seeking ways to destabilize Simba's rule, the possibility of indirect collaboration becomes deeply troubling. But perhaps most disturbing is the realization that if this theory is correct, then Kiara's eventual abandonment of the plot wasn't driven by moral awakening, but by strategic recalculation. The changing circumstances, her genuine feelings for Kovu, the escalating conflict with the outsiders, the risk of discovery, simply made the original plan too dangerous to continue. This suggests that under different circumstances, with different variables in play, the plot might have proceeded to its intended conclusion. The implications for understanding Kiara's true character and for predicting her future behavior as queen are profound and deeply unsettling. The question that emerges from this psychological analysis isn't whether Kiara was capable of such a plot, but whether she possessed the technical knowledge and opportunity to implement it successfully. The answer to that question requires examining the specific methods available to someone in her position. The technical aspects of how Kiara could have eliminated her father reveal a level of planning that's both methodical and deeply disturbing. When examining the available resources and opportunities in the Pride Lands, a clear picture emerges of multiple viable approaches that would have been virtually undetectable using the knowledge and access available to a royal family member. The Pride Lands ecosystem provides numerous naturally occurring substances that could serve as effective agents for gradual elimination. Unlike the dramatic confrontations we see in most Disney stories, the most sophisticated approach would involve slow, progressive weakening that mimics natural aging or illness. This method offers several strategic advantages. It's difficult to detect, creates plausible deniability, and allows time for political positioning during the target's decline. Consider Kiara's extensive knowledge of local flora gained through her hunting training and exploration. The Pride Lands contain several plant species with properties that could be weaponized by someone with sufficient botanical knowledge. The desert rose, common in the Outlands border regions, contains cardiac glycosides that affect heart function. Castor bean plants found near water sources produce ricin compounds that cause progressive organ failure. Even common plants like oleander contain toxins that accumulate in the system over time. The sophistication required to identify and properly utilize these substances suggests either extensive study or guidance from someone with advanced knowledge of natural toxicology. Given Kiara's documented interactions with Rafiki, who serves as both royal advisor and medicine keeper, she would have had access to detailed information about plant properties under the guise of learning traditional healing methods. More troubling is the evidence that Kiara actively sought out this knowledge. During her supposed rebellious wanderings, she consistently returned with samples of unusual plants and flowers. When questioned, she claimed these were for decoration or personal interest, but the specific species she collected form a comprehensive catalog of the region's most dangerous flora. This wasn't casual gathering, it was systematic research. The delivery method reveals even more sophisticated planning. Direct administration would be too risky and easily detected. Instead, the optimal approach would involve contaminating shared food sources during family meals or hunting expeditions. Kiara's insistence on participating in food preparation, previously interpreted as an endearing desire to contribute to family activities, takes on a sinister dimension when viewed through this lens. Royal family hunting trips provided perfect opportunities for implementation. During these excursions, Kiara had access to the preparation and distribution of meals, often insisting on helping with tasks like seasoning meat or preparing water sources. Her father's habit of eating first, as befits his status as king, would ensure targeted consumption while protecting other family members from accidental exposure. The symptoms Simba displays throughout the film, previously attributed to the stress of leadership and protective parenting, align disturbingly well with the effects of gradual toxin exposure. His increasing fatigue during longer hunts, occasional episodes of shortness of breath, and moments of confusion or indecisiveness could all indicate progressive system compromise rather than natural aging. Most revealing is the pattern of when these symptoms appear and disappear. Simba's health issues are most pronounced during periods when he's spending significant time with Kiara, particularly during their training sessions and shared meals. During times when their schedules diverge, his energy and mental clarity notably improve. This correlation is too consistent to be coincidental. The strategic brilliance of gradual elimination becomes clear when considering the political advantages. A sudden, dramatic removal would inevitably raise suspicions and create instability. But a gradual decline allows for careful preparation of the succession narrative. Kiara could position herself as the dutiful daughter stepping up to support her ailing father, gradually taking on more responsibilities until the transition becomes inevitable. This approach also provides multiple exit strategies. If the plan was discovered or became too risky, the administration could simply be discontinued, allowing natural recovery while maintaining plausible deniability. The symptoms could be attributed to various natural causes: stress, age, seasonal illness, making investigation unlikely and proof virtually impossible. The technical knowledge required for calculating proper dosages and timing suggests either extensive research or consultation with someone possessing advanced expertise. The margin for error in such operations is extremely narrow. Too little effect produces no results, while too much risks detection through obvious symptoms or accelerated timeline. Evidence suggests that Kiara had access to such expertise through her relationship with outsider allies. Zira's pride, operating in the harsh Outlands environment, would have developed extensive knowledge of survival techniques, including the identification and use of natural toxins for hunting and self-defense. This knowledge, shared through Kovu either intentionally or inadvertently, could have provided the technical foundation for Kiara's planning. The most chilling aspect of this analysis is the realization that such a plan was not only feasible, but nearly undetectable using the resources available in the Pride Lands. Without modern forensic capabilities or medical testing, the symptoms would be indistinguishable from natural causes, making investigation and proof virtually impossible. Physical evidence supporting this theory exists in the film's visual details that take on new significance when examined through this perspective. Kiara's frequent handling of food and water during family scenes, her collection and storage of various plant materials, and her unusual interest in Rafiki's healing practices all form a pattern that's consistent with systematic preparation. Even more compelling is the timing of her behavioral changes. The most intensive phase of plant collection and food handling coincides with the period when Simba's symptoms are most pronounced. As the outsider conflict escalates and alternative strategies become available, both her suspicious activities and Simba's health issues simultaneously diminish. The abandonment of this approach appears to be strategic rather than moral. As her relationship with Kovu developed, and the possibility of achieving power through political alliance rather than elimination became viable, the original plan's risk-reward calculation shifted dramatically. Why pursue a dangerous and permanent solution when a less risky alternative could achieve the same objectives? This strategic flexibility demonstrates the calculated nature of Kiara's planning. She wasn't driven by blind ambition or emotional desperation, but by cold political calculation that adapted to changing circumstances. The ability to abandon a long-term plan when better options emerge shows sophisticated strategic thinking that's deeply concerning in someone so young. The technical feasibility of the elimination method, combined with clear evidence of opportunity and access, establishes that Kiara possessed both the means and knowledge necessary to implement such a plan. What remains to be examined is the precise timeline of when and how this strategy evolved, and what specific events triggered its eventual abandonment. Constructing a precise timeline of Kiara's alleged plot reveals a carefully orchestrated campaign that evolved over months with distinct phases of planning, preparation, and escalation. When examined chronologically, the evidence suggests a sophisticated operation that began much earlier than anyone suspected and reached critical stages before being strategically abandoned. The inception phase likely began during Kiara's early adolescence, coinciding with the intensification of her royal training. This timing isn't coincidental. It represents the moment when the gap between her expectations and reality became undeniably clear. Simba's protective restrictions, combined with increasing pressure to demonstrate worthiness as future queen, created the psychological conditions necessary for radical thinking. The earliest warning signs appeared during training sessions approximately 6 months before her first hunt. Kiara's questions during these sessions reveal an unusual focus on succession protocols and power transfer mechanisms. While ostensibly asking about proper procedures, her inquiries consistently probe for vulnerabilities in the system. She asks about regency periods, about what happens if a king becomes incapacitated, about the role of advisors during leadership transitions. These questions, dismissed by Simba as natural curiosity about her future responsibilities, actually represent systematic intelligence gathering about potential succession scenarios. The sophistication of her inquiries suggests either extensive independent research or consultation with someone possessing detailed knowledge of political structures. Phase 1 of the operation appears to have been pure reconnaissance. During this period, Kiara establishes patterns of behavior that would later provide cover for more suspicious activities. Her rebellious wanderings create the expectation that she'll frequently be away from Pride Rock, with vague explanations for her whereabouts. Her interest in hunting and food preparation normalizes her presence around family meals and supplies. Most importantly, this phase establishes her reputation as a headstrong, but ultimately harmless princess. By the time her activities become truly dangerous, the Pride has already developed the habit of attributing her unusual behavior to teenage rebellion rather than genuine threat assessment. The timeline accelerates dramatically following her first formal meeting with Rafiki about advanced healing techniques. This session, occurring roughly 4 months before her first hunt, marks the beginning of Phase 2. Technical preparation. Immediately afterward, Kiara's plant collection activities intensify, and her questions about food safety and preservation become more detailed and technical. Video evidence from this period shows Kiara returning from expeditions with increasingly sophisticated botanical specimens. Her explanations for these collections, decorative purposes, personal interest, gifts for Pride members, become more elaborate and specific, suggesting careful preparation of cover stories. The timing correlation between these collection activities and her meetings with Rafiki indicates systematic exploitation of his knowledge for purposes he never suspected. Phase 3 begins with her first successful infiltration of outsider territory, approximately 2 months before the official first hunt incident. Contrary to the narrative presented in the film, evidence suggests this wasn't her first contact with the Outlands. Earlier expeditions, carefully concealed from Pride surveillance, allowed her to establish preliminary intelligence networks and assess potential alliance opportunities. The sophisticated knowledge she displays about outsider capabilities and grievances during later conversations couldn't have been acquired during brief, chaotic encounters. The level of detail suggests extended observation periods and possibly direct communication with outsider representatives. This preliminary intelligence gathering was essential for evaluating whether political alliance might offer a viable alternative to the elimination strategy. The timeline reveals that her meeting with Kovu was neither accidental nor their first contact. Analysis of movement patterns and territorial boundaries indicates that their paths had crossed at least twice before the official rescue incident. These earlier encounters, lasting only minutes and occurring in remote border areas, allowed for preliminary assessment and planning. The rescue scenario itself represents a masterpiece of tactical deception. The fire incident wasn't an accident or outside manipulation. It was a carefully orchestrated event designed to create a believable cover story for ongoing contact. Kiara's route through the hunting grounds, the timing of the grass fire, and her precise positioning for Kovu's intervention all suggest elaborate advance planning. Most damning is the evidence that the fire was set using techniques that Kiara had specifically researched during her botanical studies. Certain plant combinations, when properly prepared and positioned, create controlled burns that spread predictably, but can be easily escaped by someone with advanced knowledge of wind patterns and terrain features. The sophistication of this method indicates months of preparation and testing. Phase 4 marks the escalation period, beginning immediately after establishing regular contact with Kovu. During this phase, both elimination and alliance strategies advance simultaneously, providing multiple pathways to achieving her objectives. The symptoms exhibited by Simba become more pronounced during this period, while Kiara's political intelligence gathering reaches its most intensive levels. The dual-track approach reveals remarkable strategic sophistication. Rather than abandoning the elimination strategy upon discovering the alliance option, Kiara maintains both approaches until determining which offers better odds of success. This hedge betting demonstrates cold political calculation rather than emotional decision-making. Critical scenes from this period, when re-examined through this lens, reveal layers of meaning that were previously invisible. Kiara's emotional conversations with Simba about independence and responsibility aren't just teenage expression. They're psychological preparation for the political narrative she'll need if the elimination strategy succeeds. Her discussions about the burden of leadership and fear of inadequacy establish the foundation for a tragic but inspiring succession story. The timeline shows that the plot reaches its most dangerous phase during the period immediately preceding the outsider conflict escalation. Simba's symptoms peak during this time, suggesting the elimination strategy was approaching its intended conclusion. However, the rapid political developments surrounding the outsider situation created an unexpected opportunity that changed the strategic calculation. The revelation that transforms our understanding of the entire timeline comes from examining what happens when Kiara saves Simba during the final confrontation. This wasn't heroic intervention by a daughter protecting her father. It was damage control by a conspirator preventing the discovery of her original plan. As the outsider conflict escalated toward open warfare, the elimination strategy became liability rather than asset. If Simba were to be found in a weakened state during a military crisis, the investigation would be far more thorough than during peacetime. The risk of discovery, combined with the alternative pathway to power through the Kovu alliance, made immediate abandonment of the elimination plot strategically necessary. Kiara's dramatic intervention during the climactic battle serves multiple purposes. It publicly demonstrates her loyalty to Simba, provides heroic credentials that enhance her political position, and creates a cover story for any residual evidence of the original plot. Her apparent growth and maturity during this crisis weren't genuine character development. They were political theater designed to consolidate her improved position. The timeline concludes with Kiara achieving her original objective through alternative means. She secures early transition of significant authority, gains the political alliance she sought through marriage to Kovu, and positions herself as the architect of peace between warring factions. The elimination strategy becomes unnecessary because the political strategy succeeds beyond her initial expectations. What makes this timeline particularly disturbing is its demonstration that every major event in Kiara's story serves dual purposes. Her romantic relationship provides political cover for intelligence operations. Her character growth creates the narrative foundation for her enhanced authority. Her heroic moments eliminate evidence while building her public image. The chronological analysis reveals that far from being a simple coming-of-age story, Kiara's arc represents one of the most sophisticated political campaigns in Disney history. The precision of the timing, the careful coordination of multiple strategic tracks, and the seamless adaptation to changing circumstances demonstrate planning capabilities that are both impressive and deeply troubling. Understanding this timeline raises the ultimate question about the true nature of the evidence that supports such an elaborate theory. What specific details, hidden in plain sight throughout the film, confirm that this dark interpretation of events represents the true story behind The Lion King 2's surface narrative? The most compelling evidence supporting this theory lies hidden in the visual details and narrative gaps that most viewers dismiss as artistic choices or storytelling conveniences. When examined with the proper perspective, these elements form a comprehensive pattern that reveals both the sophistication of Kiara's original plan and the careful execution of her cover-up strategy. The visual evidence begins with subtle changes in Kiara's physical appearance and behavior that correlate directly with the timeline of her alleged activities. During the early phases of her botanical research, her paws show unusual staining and scratches consistent with handling toxic plants. Her explanation that these marks result from exploring becomes suspicious when compared to the clean paws of other young lions who engage in similar activities. More telling are the micro-expressions captured during key family interactions. Advanced frame-by-frame analysis reveals fleeting moments where Kiara's facial expressions don't match her verbal responses. When Simba discusses his health concerns or mentions feeling tired, Kiara displays brief flashes of what appears to be satisfaction or calculation before quickly adopting appropriate concern. These micro-expressions, lasting only frames in the animation, suggest internal responses that contradict her outward behavior. The most damning visual evidence appears in the background details of family meal scenes. Careful examination reveals that Kiara consistently positions herself to control the distribution of food and water, particularly items destined for Simba's consumption. Her movements during these scenes follow patterns that maximize her access while minimizing the ability of other family members to observe her actions. Even more suspicious is the evidence of her preparation techniques. In several scenes, Kiara can be observed making specific hand movements over Simba's portions that are inconsistent with normal food handling. These movements, disguised as caring gestures like seasoning or arrangement, actually represent the perfect moments for substance administration. The timing and positioning are too precise to be accidental. The narrative gaps in the official story become equally revealing when examined as potential cover-up elements. The film's timeline contains several unexplained periods where Kiara's whereabouts are vague or unaccounted for. These gaps align perfectly with the moments when her alleged activities would have been most intensive or dangerous. Most significantly, the sudden resolution of Simba's health issues coincides exactly with the escalation of the outsider conflict. The official explanation attributes his recovery to reduced stress and renewed purpose, but the timing is too convenient to be natural. A more logical explanation is the immediate cessation of whatever was causing his decline. The strategic reasons for abandoning the elimination plot reveal Kiara's sophisticated understanding of changing political dynamics. As the outsider conflict intensified, several factors shifted the risk-reward calculation dramatically. The increased security and attention surrounding the royal family made continued covert operations far more dangerous. Simultaneously, the emerging alliance opportunity through Kovu offered a pathway to power that avoided the permanent consequences and ongoing risks of the original strategy. Perhaps most importantly, the war scenario created an environment where Simba's continued leadership became politically advantageous for Kiara's long-term objectives. A successful military campaign would enhance the royal family's prestige while demonstrating Kiara's capabilities as a future war leader. The elimination strategy, designed for peacetime succession, became counterproductive in a military context. The decision to actively protect Simba during the final confrontation represents the ultimate strategic pivot. By publicly saving her father's life, Kiara accomplishes several critical objectives simultaneously. She eliminates any remaining physical evidence of her previous activities, establishes her loyalty beyond question, creates a heroic narrative that enhances her political position, and gains the gratitude and trust that ensures smooth transition of authority when she's ready to claim it. This calculated heroism reveals the true sophistication of Kiara's political instincts. Rather than stubbornly pursuing a plan that no longer served her objectives, she recognizes the opportunity to achieve her goals through alternative means while actually strengthening her position. The ability to adapt so completely and convincingly demonstrates strategic thinking that borders on the extraordinary. The cover-up operation itself shows remarkable attention to detail and long-term planning. Every piece of potentially incriminating evidence is systematically eliminated or recontextualized. Her botanical collections are gradually dispersed or destroyed. Her suspicious behavioral patterns are explained as part of her growth and maturation. Her knowledge of outsider capabilities is attributed to intelligence gathered through her relationship with Kovu. Most cleverly, she uses the chaos and emotion of the war period to rewrite the entire narrative of her development. Her previous rebelliousness becomes evidence of her independent spirit. Her strategic thinking becomes proof of her leadership potential. Her manipulation skills transform into diplomatic capabilities. The very traits that made her dangerous become the qualities that make her an ideal future queen. The question of whether Kiara truly changed or simply adapted her methods to new circumstances has profound implications for understanding her character and predicting her future behavior. The evidence suggests that her fundamental nature remained constant throughout her supposed transformation. What changed was not her ambition, or willingness to use any means necessary, but rather her assessment of which methods would be most effective in achieving her objectives. This interpretation reframes her entire character arc as a masterclass in political adaptation rather than moral growth. Her learning to work within the system becomes discovering more sophisticated ways to manipulate the system. Her acceptance of responsibility transforms into recognition that legitimate authority offers better opportunities than illegitimate. Seizure of power. The implications for her future reign as queen are deeply troubling when viewed through this lens. If Kiara was capable of plotting against her own father and maintaining such an elaborate deception for months, what limits exist on her willingness to eliminate future threats to her authority? Her demonstrated skills in manipulation, intelligence gathering, and strategic planning suggest that any opposition to her rule would face a formidable and ruthless opponent. Even more concerning is the realization that her success in avoiding detection and consequences for her alleged activities provides validation for such methods. Rather than learning that conspiracy and manipulation are wrong, Kiara learns that they can be effective when properly executed. This lesson could shape her approach to future challenges in ways that fundamentally alter the nature of leadership in the Pride Lands. The cyclic nature of royal succession takes on darker meaning when examined through this theoretical framework. Just as Scar's manipulation and eventual usurpation of power created the conditions that shaped Simba's traumatic childhood, Kiara's political sophistication and willingness to use extreme methods could establish new precedents for how power is acquired and maintained in future generations. Perhaps most disturbing is the possibility that Kiara's methods represent evolution rather than aberration in royal political tactics. Where previous generation conflicts were resolved through direct confrontation and obvious villainy, her approach demonstrates that subtlety and misdirection can achieve the same objectives with far less risk and much better public relations outcomes. The ultimate question raised by this analysis isn't whether Kiara was guilty of the specific plot alleged, but whether the pressures and incentives inherent in hereditary power structures inevitably corrupt even those who begin with the best intentions. Her story, whether interpreted as innocent coming-of-age or sophisticated political conspiracy, demonstrates that the line between heroic leadership and calculated manipulation may be far thinner than anyone wants to acknowledge. The evidence presented throughout this analysis suggests that The Lion King 2 tells a far darker story than its surface narrative implies. Rather than a tale of redemption and unity, it may actually be the chronicle of one of the most successful political conspiracies in Disney history. A conspiracy so well executed that it's hidden in plain sight, disguised as a heartwarming story of personal growth and romantic love. Whether this interpretation represents the true intended meaning of the film, or simply demonstrates how any narrative can be recontextualized through sufficiently determined analysis, remains an open question. What cannot be disputed is that the evidence supporting this theory is both comprehensive and disturbing, raising fundamental questions about power, corruption, and the stories we tell ourselves about the nature of heroism and leadership. The possibility that Kiara's reign will be built on the foundation of successfully concealed conspiracy adds a chilling dimension to the supposedly happy ending of The Lion King 2. If the future queen of the Pride Lands learned her most important political lessons through planning and nearly executing such an elaborate plot, what does that suggest about the future of the kingdom she's destined to rule?